Well, I was in Miami University
Right.
at Oxford, Ohio,
Yeah.
and studying for a physics exam when we had the word that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor.
Right.
So I packed my books and came home, got my all things in order and enlisted.
Enlisted. Right.
And
As probably
enlisted
most
in
of
the
your
Army.
classmates did, right? Didn't most of the male classmates?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
I
But that's
owed
what got you going.
$387, and I never paid him
For your
for
college?
For that,
Right.
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then I
What
went
year-
to
What year was that? Did he say?
I went to
Right after Pearl Harbor.
Oh, right.
Okay. So Pearl Harbor is was the
impetus.
thing that pushed you to going to enlisting?
the what?
Pearl Harbor is what
That's
got you
that's
enlisted?
what
Okay.
got me started.
Okay. Okay.
Besides, I was hungry and not doing well, and so that was a way out.
Okay. Okay.
And
So,
you were 19 then?
19.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
It,
So they said, welcome to the Army,
yeah.
and sent you off to training where?
You know, before that,
Yeah.
my cousin came down to meet me, and I went to Cincinnati with him.
Okay.
He joined the Navy. Well, the Navy wouldn't take me because of the teeth.
Really?
The Marines wouldn't take me because of my teeth.
Okay.
But the Army built me a partial plate,
Wow.
and I could chew.
Yeah.
I didn't have any trouble chewing. But the Marines and the Navy both turned me down.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
So, not that I would have joined.
Mhm.
After that, I came to Fort in Columbus,
Okay.
and from there we went to Camp Worth in Texas,
Worth. Okay.
Okay.
and that's where I get my basic training.
Right.
Okay.
And from then I went to the parachute school,
Yep.
and I graduated in the 44th class.
Okay.
And the 550th was formed in Panama, and they came to the United States and to Lockbourne Air Force Base, and they needed a communication chief, and they advertised it, and I took it. So I went to the 550th Airborne from jump school,
Okay.
Okay.
and I was in charge of the communication section, and we had a little hut out beyond that where we learned the dot and dash,
Oh my
Morse code.
God.
Morse
Morse
code, yeah.
code.
Yeah.
And we had to pass 19 words per minute to get our license.
Wow.
And so I went to Camp Benning, passed that
Camp Benning is
in Georgia.
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 And that's where I said, well, we took training, we laid wire and SCR 300s radios, and we were the battalion communication chief for the three companies that made up the battalion, and so I was a communication chief. I was a staff sergeant,
Okay.
Okay.
and
For the battalion.
for the battalion.
Okay.
And we left Port Norfolk and went to Africa.
Right.
We were in Africa when the 82nd was invaded Sicily. We stayed in Africa for a while, and then went to Sicily, And after Patton cleaned out Sicily, we went to the boot, and we went up the boot by electric trains,
Okay.
and just north of Rome,
Okay.
we at an airfield there, we took off for southern France.
Okay.
The first time we landed. It was daylight, and we landed and organized, and we were repulsed
Right.
in the town. We revamped, and the second time we took the town.
Okay.
And I remember one of our best mortar crews set up under a tree, and it ballooned. It blasted down, and they were out of commission.
Right.
It killed
They didn't
them.
account for the branches.
They didn't account for the branches.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
And this was in, what was the name of the town?
southern France, Lemoyne.
Lemoyne. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And we invaded that for General Patch.
Right.
We opened it up for him, and he come over with his tanks and so forth. And then we went, after that, I got shot in the neck. My buddy and I were sitting in bivouac in front of our tents, trying to take a P-38 apart.
Right.
And all of a sudden I got hit by the neck, and I reached back, and my finger went in the hole. And I said, Jim, I've been shot. And he said, well, spit. So I spit. And he said, oh, you're all right, no blood. So we called the medics, and they put some sulfur in it and transported me to the Cons Hospital. And while there, I met a captain who was willing to take it out. It lodged right up against my Adam's apple. He said, it's right there, and I'll just cut it out. And the colonel said, get me some x-rays. And he said, I don't have any. He said, get some. So they x-rayed me. And he said, the colonel said, I'll do this. This one, he said, this is a pretty intricate job, and I'll take care of this. So he put a nun at my head, and every time I wanted to swallow, I had to squeeze her hand, and she would stop the guy from cutting. And eventually they got the bullet out, and he gave it to me, and that's when we determined it was friendly fire.
Right.
Because it was a 45 and nearly expended.
And no idea where it came from.
No idea where it came from. They, in fact, the
Was it,
CO the captain thought I'd shot myself with a P-38, and he was pissed off at me until he found out that it was a friendly fire. Then he was concerned.
right. And the surgeon said you were a pretty lucky guy, right?
And the next day the surgeon said, somebody was praying for you, son. Yeah. He said that bullet went through and didn't hit anything vital.
Right.
The spine, vagus nerve, or anything. So that was my shot.
Right.
It
So they
10
didn't have
days.
anesthesia back then? They didn't use anesthesia?
no, I was awake. And the only thing I had was that nun that squeezing her hand when I had to swallow.
She was one praying for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 10 days later, I was back in my squad,
With the boys.
running the section again.
Right.
Yeah. And after that healed, we went to the Alps
Wow.
winter,
Right.
and we were in the Alps for the winter. The Germans were on one side and we were on the other,
Okay.
and we were tossing
At each other.
back and forth. They didn't want to fight, and we didn't want to fight either. So it was snowy,
Right.
and we had mules to take our supplies up the hills and the mountains, and after that we went to England,
Right.
and we were there for 12 days when the Bulge broke out, and we assumed that we were headed for the invasion of Japan.
Okay.
But it never materialized because the Bulge happened, and they needed everybody that they could find. So they took the battalion and sent us to the 17th Airborne.
Okay.
We went by C-47 to Reims, and then we trucked up to the front. And
And that front now is in Belgium.
yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah.
So the Bulge had already started when you got there.
The Bulge had already started.
Right. Now what that means to me as sort of a layperson, not really knowing the history that well, is you had the front line against the Germans. The Germans had a retaliation push to try to break the line to cut and divide you guys, right? And that's what the Bulge was. It was giving up.
They were trying to get to Antwerp.
Right. Okay.
That's their objective. There's Antwerp.
Okay.
The Germans.
Yeah.
But didn't they think by dividing that line they could have, I don't know, encircled you or?
Well, they picked the easiest land.
Right.
The divisions that were on the front had never seen combat,
Okay.
so they
And they knew that.
they walked right through them.
Right. Okay.
They walked right through them,
Okay.
and they had.
But it really would have been a turning point in the war in their favor if they'd gotten through.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
If they had made Antwerp,
Right.
it would have been a turning point.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we sent in reinforcements, you guys, from
Yeah.
England and other places to bolster up
Right.
that line. And that campaign, the Battle of the Bulge itself, lasted a couple months in tough weather, right?
Oh boy, it was cold.
Wasn't it winter? Yeah.
It was cold.
And it was a couple months at least?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
We spent 29 days in zero weather,
Right.
below zero weather,
Okay.
in a foxhole.
Right.
Yeah.
Was there not much movement, gain, or loss of ground during that time period?
Toward the end,
Okay.
they run out of supplies. They
would. Yeah.
couldn't service the
Tanks.
tanks,
Right.
and the tank stopped.
Right.
And fortunately, that was
That's what saved us.
it was a savior for us.
Right.
They
Now, what about on our side of the line? Was there adequate? Did you have enough supplies?
Oh,
Were you
yeah.
always, you never short of ammunition, food,
No.
water, clothes?
except we didn't have facilities.
Okay. Right.
They were pushing, and they were. We didn't have anything hot.
Right.
we didn't have our kitchen
Yeah.
or anything else.
Okay.
How about clothing wise? I thought I had read somewhere that
We would,
some soldiers didn't have boots and stuff. They didn't have equipment for that particular kind of weather.
the only thing we had was wool overcoats, and they were dressed in camouflage suits, white,
White.
and it was difficult to see them.
The Germans were.
Yeah.
And
Did
what?
you s- okay.
I'm sorry. What about the communications itself along the line? Did
Uh,
people feel that they knew what was going on, or did they feel isolated?
we couldn't get the 194th Infantry. They laid in the field with mortar fire.
Yeah.
And mortar fire, you either retreat or you advance.
Yeah. You don't wait.
You lay there.
Right.
That's one thing. And they laid on that field, and they were just taking a beating.
Yeah.
And I tried to get a hold of, the colonel tried to get a hold of, and of course he's yelling at me because he can't get the 194th. Well,
Couldn't
I
get through
took
to
a
them.
battery. I took a battery and went to the 94th, and I talked to him, and he said that's the first time they'd been in combat.
Okay. So they didn't.
That's
they
why
didn't
we
know they
spearheaded.
needed. You were telling them they got to get out of there.
I was trying to tell him that the colonel was trying to get the colonel
Right.
of the 194th to tell them kids they had to get out of there.
Right.
They had to either advance or retreat or something.
Right.
They laid there, and they took a beating.
Right.
And they didn't make their objective, and the 513th in either.
Right.
And we had taken this little town,
Mhm.
Hoffeles or something like that.
Yeah.
And we were out on a point, and that's when the colonel told General Miley that he would hold it till dawn if he had any reserves.
Right.
And he said he didn't have anything,
More.
and you were on your own.
Right.
So he turned to us, section leaders, and said, "You heard the man. Make up your mind.
Surrender
You want
or
to
fight."
surrender,
Right.
or you going to fight your way out."
Right.
Well, the tanks were around us, and they were running through our aid section, aid house, first aid station,
Yep.
and they were crushing the kids, and this one, it was hell.
Right.
And the kids all said, "Let's fight.
Okay.
We're fight our way out."
Right.
So we did, and we lost one man getting out.
How did you stop the tanks?
Yeah, we didn't.
Okay.
We avoided them.
Okay.
We didn't have anything to stop them.
Right. Did they have those hedgerows that you see?
No,
No.
not
Okay. That was more in France.
Not this.
Okay.
This is January the 3rd, 1944,
Okay.
when we started attack. We went in
About
with 550 men and came out with 90.
Wow.
And then 90 of us were they sent to the 194th Glider Infantry to make up the loss that they had in that battle. And that didn't set well with us.
Right.
And but we survived. We went across the Rhine with them with the 17th, and the Air Force had Weasel. Just there was nothing higher than a man. They had smoke and
Obliterated?
fire, and Well, we practiced our landing zone.
Yeah.
You couldn't find it. You couldn't see it.
Right.
So they dropped us 20 miles from where we were supposed to be. And finally, I was riding co-pilot in the Jeep. I had a Jeep in the trailer with me and 2 men.
Yeah.
And I was riding the co-pilot seat, and I could hear the conversation. The tow line had a wire stretched along it,
Right.
and you could hear the pilot, and the pilot told the glider pilot, "You're going to have to cut because I'm running out of fuel."
Okay.
I just got enough to get back on.
Right.
So he cut loose, and we went down.
Right.
And we
Got it.
we landed.
On your belly.
on the skids.
Yeah.
And it tore up the wings and a few other things, and but we got out all right.
Right. Okay.
And
Now this is after the Battle of the Bulge.
this is after the Battle of
Yeah.
Bulge.
So this is now March, April, or
Yeah,
Okay.
March.
March. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's when the First Airborne Task Force invaded Wesel in Germany,
Okay. That's in Germany.
Okay.
Montgomery.
Okay.
We were attached to Montgomery at that time,
Okay.
and the gliders took their own fields, and the paratroopers took their own fields,
Yeah.
and we jumped the Rhine, and that's when the Air Force had bombed Wesel to nothing.
Right.
They just left their
And Wesel's on the Rhine. Is that?
on Germany.
Yeah. But is it?
It's across the river.
Okay.
It's our objective
Right. Okay.
to take Wesel.
Right.
And the little girls were manning the aircraft guns.
Anti-aircraft.
And
Yeah.
the girls were manning the aircraft guns.
Right. Okay.
And we didn't lose any gliders in that fracas,
Right.
shot down, or anything else.
Okay.
We
But the ones that landed were never used again, right?
no,
Yeah. They were just disposed.
they were
They did their job.
disposed,
Right.
and most of them were tore up.
Right. Yeah. That's the way it sounded.
Wings could be
Ripped off.
tore off,
Yeah.
and I had an opportunity to go back through the area where I landed,
Mhm.
and so I cut that thing out of my glider, and
Oh, the star
we
flag.
we were looking for food.
Yep.
That's what we were looking for.
Okay.
And we heard that there was a lot of canned food, MRIs, back then. So I took a Jeep and I went back and looking for them for my squad.
Right.
So my section, and that's when I cut that thing off the glider that we landed in,
Yeah.
and because it would never been used again.
Right.
It was gone.
Right.
But that part was good, and
So you took the town,
we took.
Wesel.
I was missing in action.
Okay. After that landing.
They sent a teletype to
Right.
to my home that I was missing in action,
Okay.
and then we had a long. It was about a week before we found our outfit.
Right.
We did the Jeep we had. We had wheels, but we didn't know where they were, and we were looking for them,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually found them.
Okay.
And we tacked it up with the 17th Airborne then, and we went across Germany,
Yep.
northern Germany. Every day we would go out and cross. One of the things that happened,
Were the Germans in retreat at this point?
right,
Not putting up too much resistance?
no resistance.
None. Okay.
And at that time, we were experiencing mortar fire that was too accurate. And one of the guys had gone up in this attic, and he found his girl up there was teletyping
Your locations?
our locations with a little radio.
Right.
And I know the first sergeant took her out and cut her throat and threw her in the ground.
Right.
Threw her in the little stream that run down there.
Right.
He didn't mess with her.
Right.
He took because she was killing us.
Right.
And
How old do you think she was?
she was probably 16, 17.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but he didn't mess with her.
Right.
You can't.
He just cut her throat and threw her in the pond.
Right.
And threw her in the stream. And
During this time period, did you capture any prisoners?
we took past prisoners, and most of the time they avoided us, the boots. They took us out of the 17th Airborne and put us in the 82nd and took us to Berlin.
Right.
We policed Berlin.
Okay.
That's I know we killed a couple Russians one time that were raiding our storage place,
Yeah.
and they just cooked. They didn't say anything. They just carried them away. But most of them were Mongolians
Oh.
that we saw.
Okay.
The frontline troops.
All right.
They were not good looking, and the women, you couldn't tell the women from the men.
Right.
They were nasty.
So you were in Berlin.
Yeah, 6 months.
Hitler had not.
He'd been gone by
He
this
had,
time.
okay.
He was
He's
dead.
already dead. Okay.
Yeah.
So the war was over,
The war was over.
but you were in Berlin.
That's when they
Policeman.
divided it up.
Yeah.
The English had part.
Yeah.
We had part. The
And the
French had part, and the Russians had part.
Right.
And there was nobody out at night.
Right.
It was barren,
The local people had all gone.
and but they didn't come out at night.
Right.
We hired a few of them to work for us, and some of them were good, some of them were not bad, not good.
Right.
And as I said, we lived in a place that was a block apartment building
Mhm.
with downstairs. It had a place for gas.
Tank. Gas tank?
No,
Propane?
for mustard gas or something.
Oh,
Oh,
Yes, they could come down to the basement
Yeah.
and in that storage room and be safe.
right. It's like a bomb shelter, but for gas.
Bomb shelter,
okay.
but
Right, okay.
with gas.
Okay.
And this was beautiful. It was. It had not been destroyed, and that's where the battalions, the 82nd Airborne, took their bivouac,
Right.
and from there we, as I said, I had a platoon, and I took the platoon to the Temple Airport,
Yep.
and met the planes coming in, and passed in review and saluted them and so forth and so on. So that's all I did for 6 months.
6 months. Okay.
Now, during the war, did you have any experience with that mustard gas?
No, they never used it.
Yeah, and that was more World War One.
They never used gas. We had gas masks, but we threw them away. I don't know what would happen if they had ever used gas.
Right.
We'd have been dead.
yeah.
That's all. But the Germans respected that phase of the game and not used it.
Mhm.
And maybe our supplies was far greater than theirs, and they knew that,
Didn't want to
and
go down that path. Right.
didn't want to.
So you were in Berlin for 6 months,
Yep.
and then you went where?
Then I went home.
How'd you get home?
I was by truck to England,
Yep.
and got on the Queen Mary and came home.
Sailed home.
And I was discharged from Pennsylvania
What year was that?
in 45.
45 you were discharged?
45.
Okay.
I was crossing the Atlantic on the Queen Mary.
Sick.
You were
I
sick?
was sick all the time.
I'm sure it was crowded.
Up and down.
Right.
Oh.
Up and down.
But you guys must have felt relieved to be
Well,
headed home, right?
you feel lucky.
Yeah.
That you survived it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was the greeting like when did you land in New York? Is that
There
where
was
you went?
no greeting.
No greeting.
Nope. I don't remember anybody greeting us at all.
Huh.
But the war had been over for 6 months.
Right.
Or maybe longer.
Right.
So the thrill was over.
Yeah.
How was it when they announced the war was over? Who told you that the war was over?
Well, the thing that bothered us was Roosevelt's death. We didn't know how Truman would react.
Right.
But he was he was good for the soldiers. He dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and I say many times, but he probably saved my life.
That's what our own dad said.
If I would have been on the invasion of Japan. Yeah. He probably saved our lives. He saved a lot of American lives by dropping the bombs.
Now, do you remember where you were when you heard the news that the war was over?
We were on the Elbe. We went to the Elbe River and stopped.
Right.
And we were there for till the war got over. Yeah. And then we went to Berlin.
Was there a celebration? Did you have any?
No,
No.
I
Just
don't
relief.
remember it.
Right. And how about some of the generals that you've talked about, in whether it was in Berlin or anywhere during the campaign itself?
Well,
Did Patton ever come through?
no.
No.
We thought for Patton in the Bulge.
Right.
Yeah. He was in charge of the groups in the Bulge.
Right. But you never actually saw him?
No, never saw him.
Okay. Same with Eisenhower, you never saw him?
Never saw Eisenhower.
Right, okay. I didn't know some of the post-war...
Bradley. Never saw Bradley.
How about Montgomery? Did you say?
Never saw Montgomery.
Okay.
No.
So when you look back at the crew that you had of 10 after your initial training, do you know how many of those guys came home?
All but one.
You're pretty proud of your service, aren't you?
Well, I did my part.